Okay, so I'm going to go over Module 9.2, Multiplying and Dividing Rational Expressions. By the end of this, you should be able to answer, how can you multiply and divide rational expressions? And so I'm going to go ahead and skip the Explore. All they do is go over how we used to multiply fractions. And so I'm actually going to do that, but just not using their Explore. So I'm going to do it in a watch and recall. And all you have to do is watch and try to recall from your memory how you used to do this. You don't have to write this for this part, okay? So multiplying fractions, remember we just multiply straight across. So I would have 12 times 14, and I would have 7 times 36. Now usually we would, actually multiply these out, but I know that these could simplify. I know that there's some common factors in here that I can reduce, and so rather than multiplying 12 times 14, I'm going to break down what 12 is. 12 is 2 times 6, which is 2 times 3. So 12 is 2 times 2 times 3, and 14 is 2 times 7. So 2 times 7. 7 is just 7, right? It's a prime number. It can't be broken down. But 36 is 3 and 12, which is 2 and 6, and 2 and 3. So 36 is 3 times 2 times 2 times 3. And the reason that I broke these down as the factors is that's essentially what we're going to be doing when we're using rational expressions. We're going to break it down to the factors. And then you'll see, well, what's 2 over 2? 1. What's 3 over 3? 1. How about this 2 and this 2? Reduces. 7's reduce. So everything kind of here reduces except for this 2 and this 3. And so our answer is 2/3. For multiplying fractions, we just multiply straight across. For dividing fractions, I always use freeze, change, flip. But I believe last year some students told me keep, change, flip, or maybe it was this year. So what that means is we keep this first one, this 3/8 stays the same. We change the sign to be multiplication, and we flip this fraction. And now it's just like one of our multiplication problems that we just kind of went over. So we're going to multiply straight across, where we have 3 times 14 and 8 times 21. Now some of you guys may see right away that 7 goes into 14 and 21. But I'm going to, break this down as the factors again. So 3 is just 3, 14 is 2 and 7, 8 is, 8 is 2 times 2 times 2, right? Because it's 2 times 4, and 4 is 2 times 2. And 21 is 3 times 7. So these are all my factors, and I'm going to reduce what I can. 3 and 3. Okay, so on top, it looks like everything reduced. Remember, it reduced to 1. So I have a 1 on top and a 2 times 2 on bottom, which is 4. Now let's see if we can take what you just watched and apply it to our Explain 1 on page 440. So Explain 1 says multiplying rational expressions. And what we're going to do is factor the numerator and the denominator, and then multiply the numerator with the numerator, denominators with denominators, and then cancel those common factors. So these are our 3 steps that we're going to do. So the first one is to factor. So let's factor our numerator. 3x squared cannot be factored. Right here we have 2x squared minus 6x minus 20. So I'm going to take out a 2 and get x squared minus 3x minus 10. And this right here factors to be x plus 2, x minus 5. And then our denominators here factor to be x plus 2, x minus 4. And this denominator factors to be x plus 2, x minus 5. Now this is a video, so if you need to pause it and kind of see how the book did that, feel free to do so and then pick back up when you're ready. But step 1 is done, and so step 2 is to multiply. So I just think of this as one big fraction now, and I multiply my numerators together. Well, 3 times 2 is 6, which is how I got that right there. And then all my factors are written here. So multiplying my denominators, here's what I got. Now let's factor out, or sorry, not factor out, let's cancel out those common factors. I have an x plus 2 and an x plus 2. One on top and one on bottom, those reduce to 1. X minus 5, x minus 5. And now what's left? 6x squared is what's left on top, and an x minus 4, x plus 2 is what's left on bottom. Now we did the first part. We found the product. We have yet to find those excluded values. Now if you remember, the way we find our excluded values is we take our denominators and we set them equal to 0. And so that's what they're doing here. Our denominator here, right, if we actually look at the factored form of it, we had x plus 2, x minus 4, and if we set those equal to 0, that's how we got these right here. For this denominator here, the factored form of it was x plus 2, x minus 5. And if we set those equal to 0, we got these excluded values here. So a recap of how to multiply rational expressions is these steps right here. So factor the numerator and the denominator. Multiply straight across is kind of how I like to think of it. And then cancel your common factors. For finding your excluded values, it's this. Set your denominators equal to 0. So the values that, I guess I could have written it like this, is the values that x cannot be are these right here, or I would say x cannot be -2, x cannot be 4, and x cannot be 5. It all depends how the book is asking you to write it or what the directions say. And this says find excluded values. So if you just list, the excluded values are when x equals -2, x equals 4, and x equals 5. Now let's move on to explain 2 and see if we can do dividing rational expressions. For dividing rational expressions, let's go through the steps real quick. Multiply by the reciprocal. So what are they saying here? They're applying that freeze, change, flip. And then what do? They factor the numerator and denominator. They multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and cancel the common factors. So if you actually notice, this is step 1, 2, and 3 from explain 1. Boom. Those 3 right here. Exactly what we just did for multiplying is what we are going to do for dividing. But before we can do that for dividing, we have to do that first step. And that step is to freeze, change, flip, or multiply by the reciprocal. So with dividing, there's just one additional step, and the other ones are the exact same. So here is the example. And what we're going to do is we're going to freeze this. We're going to keep this exactly the same. We're going to change this division to multiplication like they did right here. And then they flipped these. And that's how they got this right here. And now we just move on to the next one. Factor the numerator and the denominators. So my numerator here can be written as x plus 7, x plus 7. My numerator here, when I factor it, that's x and x. It's 2 and 1, and what multiplies to a positive, I'm sorry, what adds to a positive 2, that would be positive 2 and a minus 1. That's how they got our numerator here. Our denominator, we have x squared. I guess you could write that as x times x, if you'd like. And then this right here is x and x. What multiplies to 14 is 7 and 2 to add to 9 both need to be positive, and that's how we got this. So after you're done factoring, you're going to multiply straight across, which is what they have here. We're going to multiply, and then find what common factors cancel. So x plus 7 over x plus 7, x plus 2 over x plus 2, and then we write what's left. So we have an x plus 7 and an x minus 1. That's how we got that. And we had an x squared that was left here. For your excluded values, remember you're just setting your denominators equal to 0. So our denominators are, let's go back up to my original here. This is what I'm looking at. And I have x equals 0, so we have to exclude that value. Remember we can factor this right here to be x plus 2, x minus 1, and so those excluded values are a negative 2 and a positive 1. Now the other values that we have to exclude are, remember we flipped this fraction when we did it right here. So we have to exclude that denominator as well. So that denominator, or those values for that denominator as well, when we factored that we got x plus 7, x plus 2, and when we set those equal to 0 we got x equals negative 7 and x equals negative 2. So our excluded values for division, remember, have to include the denominator from the original question, and after you flip it, those excluded values as well. So a quick little recap. When we are dividing, the only different step is that freeze change flip, or that you multiply by the reciprocal. And then after that, you're just going to factor, multiply straight across, and cancel your common factors. For excluded values, you have to set your denominator equal to 0. Just don't forget, we flipped one of our fractions, so we have to include both those denominators. Okay. Recap of multiplying. We factor the numerator and denominator. Ooh. Let's see if I can erase that. So we factor the numerator and denominator, we multiply straight across, and we cancel our common factors. For finding excluded values, it's just when our denominator is 0. Hope that helped. Remember, this is a video, so you can stop, pause, rewind, and get extra help. Thank you and good luck.